Getting older as a person living with HIV is bizarre. I was supposed to die. We went through this horrible experience that was full of fear and uncertainty and loss and grief year after year.
That nobody can really understand unless they were there at that time. It's just being decimated. Not only that, but then we were being judged, that we were being ignored, that the government was ignoring us, and that we literally were on our own.
When I first heard about HIV, I was working as a construction worker, and I went into the break room, and there was a Time magazine that had a short, brief article about a rare gay cancer. A cold chill went down my spine.
And what they were saying in those articles is that those men were very promiscuous, that they used a lot of drugs, and so I thought, well, that's not me, I'm fine.
I was thinking, well, this is happening in New York, in San Francisco, you know, those are those populations. But I'm just a small town boy.
I didn't think I was a part of that story, except that it was devastating my neighbors.
In the earliest days of being in San Francisco and being in the Castro, it just became more and more this kind of something's coming. Like a storm was building. And then I'll never forget the day when I noticed like how many for rent signs I saw in windows just down the block from me. And I remember thinking like, they're all leaving. They're dying or they're leaving.
And so I remember going to go look for one of these guys and going to this hospital and just seeing all these gurneys in the hallways. They didn't have enough beds.
And my husband and I would take the Bay Area Reporter every week. And we started counting the people that we knew who had passed by reading obits. We sat down one day and we were at 260 people that we knew who had died. And we decided that we would simply stop reading the Bay Area Reporter.
I wouldn't say between the age of about 15 when I went to camp to about 26, I went to over 50 funerals of people who were born positive.
You know, we were death doulas, as it were. And it really took a toll on us. So young, no idea what we were doing, but just trying to be there for the person that was dying.
I remember clearly having a sense of, I want to run away from this, and it's all around me. There's no running away from this. There was a presumption that I would become HIV positive at some point in my life.
I was born in 1989 with HIV in Brooklyn, New York. They used to call me the miracle baby.
I caught on pretty quick that I was HIV positive. You know, I think it was like a commercial for like AZT or something, and I was like, and it said it was for AIDS, and I was like, I have that. But I was 4.
I found out in 1988 that I was HIV positive. I wasn't but like 17 and a half years old. And I had pneumonia. All my lymph nodes were swollen in all my whole body. And they asked me, had I ever been tested for HIV? So they took the test.
Back then, there was no instant test or quick test. About 3 weeks later, when I got a letter in the mailbox, I was scared to death.
We didn't have viable treatment yet. Everybody came into that diagnosis with the assumption that we were going to die.
And I remember the social worker at the 17th Street Clinic, and she's like, how would you feel if it came back positive?
The next question, would you commit suicide? Because that's what people were doing.
And then she says, well, the bad news is you're HIV positive.
And I hit the floor. Literally hit the floor.
And I asked questions, but the doctor had no answers.
It wasn't much information given. So it wasn't no counseling, no case management or anything of that nature at that point in time.
It was just a cold room with cold chairs, and in a cold way, you are positive to this virus.
And at the time, only thing that went through my brain was, how long do I got to live?
They told me that my husband had a 50% chance of walking out of the hospital room alive. I tested positive a week later.
And I said, so you're telling me I'm going to die? How long do I have? And she said, you'll most likely not live to see the age of 30.
I was told I had 18 months to live and to get my shit in order.
And then suddenly it was like Technicolor. Everything was bright and brilliant, and it was this kind of hyper-real thing. It took me a couple of years to figure out that was trauma. That was like shock.
HIV, at the very beginning, when I first was diagnosed, HIV was a curse.
Like if we remember what that was like in the 80s to test positive, you were trash. Like it was, nobody wanted to say that.
There was so much homophobia and so much hate. The nurses were rude, the doctors were rude. There was so much cruelty.
You know, I experienced isolation and seclusion, you know, with parents not wanting their kids to hang out with me or play with me.
I was scared to work, scared of society, scared of people, scared of stigma, and I just lived in fear.
I think the biggest challenge was feeling very unlovable, unworthy, and that my potential for having a family of my own, having children, for example, was just cut short.
I'll never forget walking through the Castro and feeling like this diseased pariah. You just think like, oh, you don't know, I'm poison. I'm poisoned.
I felt nasty. I couldn't imagine laying with anyone, letting anybody do anything to my body.
And I kind of lived behind drawn curtains and shades for a year and was like really depressed about it.
The fact that I was not able to tell anyone that I might die tomorrow. The communities for many immigrants and for many Latino people, it's our families. I just couldn't tell the family my family that I was here with of what happened. I just couldn't.
So I tried to use all the drugs in DC. You know, I think, like I said, I was on a suicide mission, trying to kill myself before the actual disease killed me. And the medication that they were putting you on was killing you also, or to make you so sick you wish you was dead.
When I first got diagnosed, the only thing that was out there was AZT. But I was taking them it was either every 4 hours or every 6 hours.
You had to wake up in the middle of the night, set your alarm clock, take your medicine.
So at one point, I was on 50 or 60 pills a day. I was taking antivirals, antifungals, antibiotics.
I was really scared to take the medication because I watched my husband get so sick from it.
You get stuff on your skin, psoriasis, anything you eat will come back up.
I could not drive 2 miles across the city without having severe diarrhea.
I couldn't even walk. It made me really sick, and I said, I'm not gonna do this. I'd rather die than do this.
I had to take care of my kids. I couldn't afford to be sick in bed and get them off to school and get their homework done and get them to whatever they were participating in.
And they told me that if you don't take your medicine, it's like committing suicide. I said, well, I'm not one to do that, so.
I had to take it. I ain't had no choice. I didn't want to die. I didn't want to. I wasn't ready to die. And I still ain't.
At the time that I tested positive, I had really messed up my life. Like, people didn't talk to me. I didn't have anything. I got into sobriety with a purse, a dress, and a pair of shoes, and they were all stolen. So how it changed is like I was determined to stay sober. I thought, if I'm gonna die, I'm gonna do one thing.
And I knew I couldn't change my whole story, but I could just change little things and live day by day.
I got diagnosed right after I graduated from graduate school, and I was starting a new career. As a young Black person working in Silicon Valley.
When I'm faced with a challenge, it brings out the best in me that pushed me to even work harder.
I was just at that point hoping to live to see 30. You know, I want to live to see my kids graduate.
I wasn't probably gonna have this life like this. I was gonna have a life like that. But if that's the life I was gonna get, then I was gonna fill that. I just wanted to fill it with as much love that I possibly could. And it was easy to do because there were other people that needed to make a difference. People wanted to come together. People wanted to be like, how do we do this horror story that we're walking through?
And I always say that those times were the best of times and the worst of times, because the worst part was that we were seeing our friends die. The best part was the amazing amount of support system that existed back then.
And just the simple fact of starting to be able to talk about it with someone, it just makes so much difference.
So I participated in the luncheons, I got involved, I started volunteering.
I was learning more about the virus, and it was helping me. It was helping me to help others.
Whenever I'm struggling, you know, the way for me to get out of it is to find someone else that's struggling and help them through it.
The last thing I wanted to do was just go home and wait to die. I wanted to get out there and fight. Things were happening, and I wanted to be a part of that fight.
People were angry, and when ACT UP showed up on the scene, I've got to tell you, it was the radical, angry people who inspired everybody else. They weren't going to put up with this bullshit anymore.
One of the interesting things that happened around the early activism especially was because we didn't have answers, we began becoming our own researchers.
In the pre-AIDS days, doctors were gods, and they were taught that they were gods.
My father was in the military, and you never questioned the doctor. Whatever the doctor said, they did.
And so when AIDS activists started becoming involved in saying, wait a minute, we're here, and we need you to be listening to what we're saying.
We were demanding that you take into account our life experience.
Let us be in charge of, like, control. Everything was out of control, so give the patient some control, especially when the stakes are so high. The stakes were so high.
When I was 10, everything they were doing had just stopped working. And in the midnight hour, I mean, like, our pastors praying over me and everything, they found the right cocktail, so the right combination of medicines.
It wasn't until 95, 96, when they had the protease inhibitors, that the doctor said there's better medications now.
And at that time I had 0 T cells and a zillion opportunistic infections, and so my doctor said, like, what do you have to lose? Nothing.
The viral load went down. I had more energy, and I had like swollen lymph nodes here and everywhere, and they went down. And I felt like, my God, this is a miracle. This is really happening.
At a certain point, probably about 1999, it looked like I might make it.
It went from, oh shit, I'm gonna die, to oh shit, I'm gonna live.
oh my God, I'm going to be an old man with AIDS.
One of the things about me growing my gray beard, it is an incredible reminder to me that I didn't expect to live this long.
I often say, this is such a privilege. This is so great. Like, it is fine. Like, my wrinkly skin and my saggy parts and my aches and pains are badges of honor. And it is hard to live in the joy of that, you know?
Aging is a whole other different adventure.
Consensus around aging with HIV is that you age 10 to 15 years faster. You're not only getting it earlier, you're getting it worse.
Some of the challenges that I see as a lifetime survivor is the unknown. We don't know what's going on in our bodies. And I think that's the biggest mystery, where they were feeding us medication and just hoping that something would land and something would stick. We are now exhibiting in our 30s, like different type of Alzheimer's, heart problems, strokes. It's so many things that parallel to those who in the over 50 population.
I've been on HIV meds since late 1995. So it's 30 years now. And they have done a number on my body. I have problems with my bones. I have problems with my spine.
I have neuropathy in my feet and hands, the blood pressure and glaucoma, some weird thing with some film in my eye that's getting gray. And I can't get them fixed because I can't afford it.
Even people like me who are fortunate enough to be on a long-term disability policy if they were working, but it goes away when you hit 65. So you have people who never thought they would live to be 50, let alone 60 or 65, facing the prospect of losing virtually all their income.
I did not plan well for my future, because even though I stopped believing that I was going to be dead immediately, I still didn't think it was going to last this long.
Being HIV positive in the early days interrupted the plans that people had. So once that happened, I was like, I don't need a degree. I'm not going to be alive. I don't need to like save money. Things that I regret to this day. And then once I realized I had made no plans, I had a kind of a bad downward spiral. I couldn't sleep. I was having hideous nightmares and a deep fear of like, what am I going to do? I'm going to live. But what does that mean? How does that look?
I couldn't identify it at the time, but a certain time of the year, every year, I would get really depressed. I would just want to stay in my room and just shut the world out.
I think there's a guilt in it, you know, that you have lived and others passed away. And I wonder sometimes, why am I here, you know?
I used to just go to a group that was with other teenagers living with HIV. The majority, unfortunately, passed away. There's only like maybe 4 of us that are still alive.
And I think when my last good friend, when she passed away, that broke me. And I'm like, what is going on? Why are we still dying? What's happening?
And so I think that does something to a person. I think it does something to your sense of safety in the world.
You know, I still have this disease that could take me out. And, you know, if I get really sick at times, there's always that fear because of what I've witnessed in the past.
Once you have a death sentence and the people around you are dying, I think it never goes away.
There's this experience of being HIV positive, but then there's this other experience. It was incredible how many of us really lost everyone that was our chosen family. So many of us.
We had coffees every Thursday, a group of us did. And I said, I was having this experience, and they're like, I had something similar going on with me. We talked about how lonely we were. And I think that sense of isolation and loneliness is prevalent in all of our communities.
We have to pretend like it's 1985.
In 2013, I started Let's Kick Ass AIDS Survivor Syndrome, and we rented a room at the LGBT Center, and we were hoping for 40 people, and 250 showed up.
This is a full house. This is so awesome. Thank you.
I started to look for people that they were living with HIV for a long time. To create a group online is very easy. You just press a few buttons. And suddenly I started to receive emails and phone calls like every day or in the middle of the night.
We, the Dandelions, are trying to create a national network of people that are born HIV positive from the 80s up to the 2000s, really. We are different than long-term survivors, though we fall into that category as well. We are Dandelions, and we are the lifetime survivors.
And so as these groups were created, it's powerful to see 10, 11 years ago, we did not have that.
I feel like we are a forgotten demographic in many respects.
Y'all dropped the ball. We're literally fending for ourselves with no data, no research, and everybody kind of forgot about us until we started making noise again in the last couple years.
The most important thing to me, reflecting on my experience as a long-term survivor, is that we learned exactly who we are. This group that was this vilified group turned out to be these guardian angels of like how to take care of one another in the midst of challenging times. And it's all true today. We're still doing that.
I go to the women's meetings, but I've never literally stood up and told my whole story in that meeting. So, but I would like to, from this day on, I would like to be an advocate if I can. And I'm a survivor, so maybe I can give them some kind of pointers to survive also.
We're proof of one another's resilience. We're proof of one another's innocence. We're proof of one another's courage, of one another's possibility.
Like it's all of these things. No one taught us this. No one taught us this. We are literally reshaping our world.